Chapter 5. Abandonment. Every person who is raised in an alcoholic family experiences abandonment. The alcoholic family, because of its preoccupation with alcoholism, cannot fully nurture a child. Neither parent, either alcoholic or codependent, is able to supply the child with consistent love and support. There are two major types of abandonment that the ACA experiences: physical and emotional. Physical abandonment. Physical abandonment is when a child is left alone by his parents and its basic physical needs are not met. Physical abandonment of small children can come in many forms. The most common are: 1. Missed feedings or meals. 2. Long periods of time with unchanged and soiled diapers. 3. Children left alone for hours and sometimes days. 4. Infants left in the care of older brothers and sisters who are still children themselves. The misconception that abandonment is when the parents, quote, give the child up, unquote, or, quote, leave the child on the church step, unquote, is just that, a misconception. Most children born into alcoholic families are raised in that environment. Many of these children suffer from repeated physical abandonments. All too often, what is publicized are the cases in which the child or children are left alone to fend for themselves for days. Although this does occur, sometimes with tragic results, most of the physical abandonment that ACAs experience is of shorter duration, generally hours rather than days. The repeated physical abandonment leaves the child with a core of fear and loneliness that extends into adulthood. The reinforced message that, quote, you are in the way and not wanted, unquote, is a message that ACAs receive as children and keep with them. Emotional abandonment. The emotional abandonment that a child in an alcoholic family experiences is often as devastating to the child as physical abandonment. ACAs often state that they cannot understand why they feel so abandoned. They know that their parents never left them alone and that all of their physical needs were met. What these ACAs are suffering from is emotional abandonment, which, to one degree or another, all ACAs experience. The emotional abandonment occurs when the parent, although there physically, is not there emotionally. The parent's focus is on either the drinking, the person who is drinking, or, as in the type 3 alcoholic family, the behavior of the family. Regardless of where the focus is, it is not on the child. Although the physical needs of the child are met, there is no nurturing, hugging, or emotional intimacy developed. Children know when a parent is not there for them emotionally. This emotional abandonment can, and does, have far-reaching effects on the ACA. The deep sense of worthlessness that ACAs experience is directly related to being abandoned as children. The more severe the abandonment, the deeper the sense of worthlessness. Children are not born into the world as blank pieces of paper. They have a whole set of emotions, and at a very early age can perceive the emotions of their parents. Current research indicates that even before birth, the unborn child has emotions and reacts to the emotional state of both the mother and, to a lesser degree, the father. ACAs who've been emotionally abandoned have good reason to fear abandonment as adults. They have been abandoned time and time again as children. The message that they got from their parents was the same as those ACAs who were physically abandoned. You are in the way and not wanted. Abandonment sparks fear in the child. If we try to view the world as a child, we can get a sense of what this fear is like. A child cannot take care of him or herself. Without adults, parents, in most cases, children would not survive. This is not a theory. A 2-year-old child left to its own devices would die. Kids are not capable of taking care of themselves. and they know it. Children may not be able to verbalize the fear of their parents leaving and not coming back, but the fear is there. A child, when abandoned, experiences a fear that is primal. It is the fear of not surviving, the fear of dying. The following chart is an emotional matrix of a typical ACA. So this particular chart, I'm going to try and explain it because it's a simple flow chart. Please bear with me here. It's called the abandonment matrix. There's a box that says abandonment that goes into this other box that says fear. Okay? And then underneath the fear, there are two other boxes. One goes to the left, one goes to the right. The one that's to the left is anger. The one that's to the right says hurt. So now, here we go. I'm going to review what we've done so far. The abandonment matrix. First comes abandonment, which goes into fear. The fear splits into anger and hurt. Underneath the boxes of anger and hurt is this big line, and it's called the fear barrier. So underneath the anger box, there's resentment and distrust. Underneath the hurt box is loneliness and sadness. So I'll review it one more time. Abandonment matrix. Abandonment in the first box. Below that, it goes into fear, which is then the next box. So abandonment, fear. Fear splits up into two boxes. One is anger to the left. The other one is hurt to the right. Then underneath that is like a big fence, I guess, of fear barrier, which splits up underneath anger into resentment and distrust, and splits hurt into loneliness and sadness. So that's what we're going to take a look at next. I'll go back to the book now. Let's look more closely at this chart, reading from the top down. Abandonment. This is a core issue for ACAs. Many ACAs, because of the nature of the alcoholic family, experience physical abandonment. All experience emotional abandonment. Many often a combination of both. Fear. The fear that ACAs always have, at the core of their being, is the primal one of not being certain that they will survive. Although most ACAs cannot identify where this fear comes from, they often will state that they have unnamed fears, and they are always afraid. Because the fear was established in the ACA at a very early age, its roots are unknown to the ACA, and the ACAs are generally baffled as to why they are so afraid. The feeling of fear is so overwhelming to the ACA that its energy is diverted into hurt and anger. Anger. The overwhelming sense of fear that the ACA has as a result of abandonment will be expressed in the feeling of anger. The anger is a way to deal with the fear. Anger is manifested in resentment and distrust. The resentment at the parents by ACAs, which is easy to understand, is a direct result of the children not understanding why this is happening to them. Their, quote, knowers, unquote, know that they deserve better than this. The resentment is, in reality, anger and rage that is controlled, repressed, and transformed into resentment because the alcoholic family is not generally a safe place to show anger. The distrust that ACAs have of the world is directly related to not being able to trust their parents. Their parents were not there for them when they needed them. Therefore, ACAs develop deep, general distrust of the world and the people in it. It is important to note that a child's primary view of the world is developed through the relationship that the child has with his or her parents. Hurt. The overwhelming fear that the ACA experiences as a result of abandonment manifests in the feeling of deep hurt, which includes the feelings of loneliness and sadness. Many ACAs have such a deep well of loneliness that no matter how many friends they have or relationships they develop, The feeling never leaves them. This loneliness is a direct result of being abandoned as a child. There is also a sorrow that runs deep in ACAs, so deep that many ACAs are unaware that this sadness exists inside of them. The sorrow and sadness are a direct result of the knowing that their parents abandoned them, knowing that they were left alone by the people who were most important in their lives. There is an equal amount of hurt and anger in the ACAs. Many ACAs have developed the ability to manifest one or the other of these two emotions. As a rule, and this is a very general rule, men have an easier time displaying anger, and women have an easier time displaying hurt. Most ACAs are one-sided in their ability to display emotions. It is important to know that even though ACAs can display anger, they also have tears and hurt that are present and repressed. An ACA who can show tears also represses an equal amount of rage. Looking again at the abandonment matrix on page 34, we can see that there is a barrier of fear between the hurt and the anger, and the outer emotions of resentment, distrust, sadness, and loneliness. This barrier of fear prevents the ACA from both acknowledging and feeling the core issues of fear, hurt, and anger. The fear is present because of the overwhelming power that the ACA senses in these emotions. Many ACAs make statements like, quote, "If I begin to cry, I don't think I will ever stop," unquote. Or, quote, "If I ever let my anger out, I will lose control and kill someone," unquote. These fears are very real to the ACA and are not to be discounted. The ACA feels that he or she must maintain tight control over feelings. This compulsion to control spills over into all other aspects of life. Sid, a 40-year-old ACA, said, "I don't do tears. Sometimes I get a feeling of hurt. It will seem to come up from deep down inside me. It's almost like physical pain in my chest and behind my eyes. I'll feel like I want to cry, but nothing will come, and I really don't want to cry. I'm afraid to. I'm afraid that if I ever start to cry, I'll never stop." Sid's experience is duplicated again and again by ACAs. Not only hurt, but also for anger. Carmen, a 32-year-old ACA, said almost the same thing when she told her ACA's group that she never got angry. Her statement was, "I never get angry. I'm too afraid to. I'm afraid if I ever got angry, I would lose control and I would be locked up and the key would be thrown away." These are very common thoughts for ACAs to have. The emotions of resentment, distrust, sadness, and loneliness on the emotional matrix are those emotions that are most accessible to the ACA. These emotional states, although not talked about by most ACAs, are acknowledged by many ACAs to be present in their lives. The resentment, distrust, sadness, and loneliness are feeling states that the ACA has learned to live with, although this is not the picture that he or she tries to present to the world. The ACA tries to hide feelings and to pretend to be just like everyone else. These behavioral fronts will be discussed more fully in Chapter 6. The abandonment/engulfment phenomenon. All ACAs have issues around abandonment, and some ACAs also have issues around abandonment/engulfment. Engulfment is when the parent feels guilty for abandoning and neglecting the child and tries to make up for this by smothering the child with attention. The, quote, "I love you, go away," unquote message was very firmly programmed into the ACA named Jake. As a boy, he lived with his mother, an alcoholic, and his younger sister. His mother, who was the only adult in his life, would go on drinking binges and disappear for 3 or 4 days at a time. Jake, at age 8, was responsible for taking care of his sister. He would borrow money from neighbors for food for the two of them. Sometimes he would even steal food. When Jake's mother would get sober enough to realize she needed to go home and take care of her family, she would arrive with gifts and lavish affection on both Jake and his sister, telling them both that she was sorry and would never leave again. But Jake's mother repeated this pattern until her death. By that time, Jake was a teenager living away from home. Jake reported having lots of difficulty in sexual relationships. When he was attracted to someone, he would smother the person with affection, then would become very afraid and withdraw emotionally from the relationship. He would repeat this pattern until his partner would become fed up and leave, or until he himself could not stand it any longer and would break up the relationship. Jake's was a classic case of abandonment/engulfment. During group therapy, Jake would demonstrate the same affection/withdrawal behavior with the group that occurred in his relationships. Over a period of time, he was able, little by little, to break the pattern of behavior that he learned as a child from his mother. It was difficult work for him, but he persevered and learned that he could stop smothering people with affection and they would still like him. He also learned to trust that most people were not like his mother, and that he did not have to continue to retreat into withdrawal and isolation to protect himself. The abandonment/engulfment phenomena is fairly common in ACAs. When the parent abandons the child, either physically, emotionally, or both, the parent, feeling guilty, often smothers the child with affection and love. Of course, this smothering of the child is only for a short period of time, until the next abandonment. This inconsistent behavior constantly keeps the child off balance. The ACA learns at a very early age that, quote, "I love you, go away," unquote message. As adults, many ACAs are baffled by the way they treat those they love. They act the way that they have been taught by their parents. Quote, "I love you, go away," unquote. The ACA strongly desires intimacy and tries to achieve it by smothering the person with whom he or she wishes to be intimate, and then the ACA pushes that person away.